everyone, welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be talking about the wheel and house system. So the zodiac wheel, as most of you know and have seen, is split up into 12 sections that look kind of like a pizza or a pie. And these 12 sections represent the part in the sky that your planets were sitting when you were born. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over the houses and we're gonna go over what each one means and why it even means that, the ruler of that house and anything else that might be associated with that house. So the first house is actually representative of something called your ascendant or your rising sign. We talked about your ascendant in an earlier video, so I'm not gonna go through that, but that is where the cusp of your first house lies. And I know some of you might have heard the word cusp before, and what that means is where a house ends or begins. So that is what's considered the cusp. Some people talk about cusps of signs. It is where one sign ends and the other sign begins. Now, whether or not you believe cusps are real, that is not what we're debating here. I just wanted to let you know the way that I am using the word cusp in this video. Your first house is ruled by Aries traditionally. That is a traditional ruler of the first house because it is the first sign. That first house has a lot of Aries qualities to it because of course that's its ruler. It's the house that rules your physical body. It is the house that rules how you look. It is the house that rules the head because Aries rules the head. It is the house that rules over your self-image, your self-awareness, your personality, your assertiveness, your self-confidence, anything relating to the self. The first house is the house of the self. Of course, numerologically, the number 1 refers to the self. So if you have a planet that is in your first house, it is likely going to have an effect on the way that you look and the way that you're perceived in the world. Here's an example. If you have the moon in the first house or at the cusp of the first house, you're going to appear more like a Cancer rising because the moon rules the sign of Cancer. That means that you could have a more full face, or you could have a more wide-eyed look. You could have a sweet disposition. There are Cancer-like qualities to your appearance, regardless of what sign is in the first house for you. It also could mean that you wear your emotions on your sleeve. It's not hard for people to see what you're thinking or what your emotions are. If you're having a bad day, people are likely going to see it. If you are upset or if you are super happy, people are likely going to see it. Your moods are very, very obvious to people because of course the moon rules our emotions and our moods and of course our mother. Moving on to the second house. The second house is ruled by Taurus because it is the second sign. So Taurus is known as the bull, and for a good reason. Taurus energy can be very fixed and stubborn. We talked about fixed energy in a past video. This house talks about worth, your self-worth as well as your outward worth, so your wealth. It also rules over your talents, your resources, basic needs to survive, so your survival needs, your possessions and the things that you own, and the things that bring you pleasure. The number 2 or the second sign or the second house does have a lot to do with the other because the number 2 in numerology has a lot to do with the other. So if you have a planet, let's say Mercury in the second house, you might be someone that thinks a lot about your personal safety and security when it comes to your finances or even just in general, like the house that you live in. You might talk a lot about it. You might be somebody that, for instance, has a podcast on finances. That's just one example, but I wanted to give you something to show you how a planet can show up and influence a house. The third house is ruled by the sign of Gemini. It rules communication, the rational or lower mind, your short distance surroundings, so your community, your neighborhood, your communication and learning and teaching, especially from when you were a child because it rules that time of your life, your siblings, your neighbors, thoughts and ideas, any form of communication, especially writing and publishing. So if you have a planet, let's say Pluto in your third house, that could be an area of your life that a lot of radical change happens. So it could be that in your childhood there was a very specific experience with a sibling or a neighbor that shaped you. It could also show up as somebody that's really involved in their community and they get their big break through that. There are tons of ways, like I said, that these can show up. That's just an example. So the fourth house is ruled by Cancer and it talks about your foundations emotionally. So how good was your emotional foundation when you were a child? The fourth house talks about the actual home. So it's the home or the house of ancestors, of your physical structure of your home, of your mothering environment, land, traditions, security. It's very much about What is it that helps you to feel emotionally stable and grounded? It's a very important house. It is one of the cardinal houses. If you remember from my other video, cardinal signs are the signs that start new energy, so they're very important. And the Cancer house, the 4th house, is known as the IC, the Imum Coli. And just like the Ascendant, it is one of the 4 points of the cardinal cross, and it makes it such an important part in any chart. So whatever is on your 4th house cusp or your Imum Coli, if there's a planet there, it is a super important planet for you. Any planet that is sitting on one of those 4 axes is super important. If you have, let's say, Neptune in your 4th house, your home could have been a very dreamy place. It could have felt very wishy-washy as well, depending on the aspects of that planet or how it's affecting other planets around it. So you could have had, let's say, a parent that was a little bit wishy-washy. Let's say Jupiter is beside it. It could have been an environment that wasn't very stable because Neptune puts kind of a fog around everything. Neptune is a very dreamy yet foggy planet that kind of puts everything in rose-colored glasses and you don't see the reality of the situation. So there could have been a lot of stuff going on at home that you might not have noticed because of Neptune clouding your vision. The 5th house is ruled by Leo, which is of course the 5th sign, and it is just like what it sounds. It's fiery, it's fun, it's playful. This house rules children, gambling, speculative sports, dating, creating art, entertainment, acting, being on the center stage, your creative pursuits. So this house is the fun house. That is what it's called, the fun house. And it's a house where you are able to express yourself. So if you have a planet like, let's say, Saturn sitting in your 5th house, it's going to be a struggle, and it is a karmic thing for you to work through your blocks creatively. Saturn in the 5th house is a very karmic placement because it also talks about having kids later in life or not having kids at all. That is one of many ways that it could show up in your life, but I wanted to give you that example. The 6th house is the house of Virgo, the 6th sign of the zodiac, and that house is all about your very mundane, very boring things that you have to get done to live your life. So it's almost the polar opposite of the 5th house of Leo, because Leo is the fun house and then the 6th house comes in and it's like, did you exercise? Did you eat your greens? Did you get enough sleep? Are you drinking enough water? That house is all about your day-to-day routines. It is all about your habits, what you do on a daily basis. Are you healthy? It's all about health and exercise. It's also a house that talks about self-improvement, charity, and service to others. It is a huge house that talks about service to others. For instance, if you have Uranus in your 6th house, it might be hard or difficult for you, especially in childhood, to create a stable routine because Uranus is that planet that is shock, that is not super stable. It's a great energy, but it's not the greatest energy in the 6th house because it brings an unpredictability with it. So that could make it really hard for you to get things kind of solid in your daily routine. The 7th house is ruled by the sign of Libra, and it is all about combining and balancing opposing forces. So how do we do that? Well, as humans, a symbolic way of doing so is marriage, right? We have a man and a woman traditionally, and these two opposing forces, masculine energy and a feminine energy, coming together in a marriage or a sacred union. The 7th house talks about marriage, contracts, partnerships, justice, balance, harmony, legal matters, and business agreements. This is another one of the 4 angles that make up the cardinal cross. So this one is called the descendant. Right across from it is your 1st house, the ascendant. If you have any planets that are on the cusp of the 7th house, they're going to be very important. The 7th house is known as the house of the other, while the 1st house is known as the house of the self, like we mentioned earlier. So the 7th house is really important because how we get to know ourselves better is through the other. So we have to integrate those 2 houses. They are the most polar opposite of any house, and so we have to learn to integrate them. For example, if you have Venus in your 7th house, that is going to be somebody that might be very relationship oriented. You might find this person is always in a relationship, or they find it hard to not be in a relationship. They might even have trouble being self-reliant depending on what's in their 1st house. Take a look and see what you have in your 7th house and how that might apply to you in your life. The 8th house is ruled by the 8th sign of Scorpio. This is a water sign, so you know we go deep here. This house is all about regeneration, sex, death, rebirth, anything occult or hidden or unknown, deep connection, resources of other people, things that are hidden, and beginnings and endings. So this house is very much tied to the occult, is very much tied to astrology and mysticism and things that bring you deep into yourself, which a deep connection with another brings you deep into yourself as well. Deep soul bonds are formed in the 8th house. So for example, if you have your moon in the 8th house, your emotions are going to be very, very deep and can even be turbulent because it's representative of that Scorpio energy. So it's similar to having a Scorpio moon. So that could play out as someone that's a little secretive with their emotions, that kind of hides it from other people, that doesn't necessarily want to show on the outside how much they're actually feeling on the inside, because again, it is so similar to a Scorpio moon. So no matter what sign it's in, it's going to have those qualities. The 9th house is the house of Sagittarius, the 9th sign, and this house is all about freedom, higher learning. So think colleges and institutions, anything that involves a connection to the divine, traveling, the higher mind, publishing, broadcasting, philosophy. This house is all about that guru mentality where you are so connected to the divine and you are that wise teacher that helps other people along their path. So when you have a planet in the 9th house, let's say your sun, there is your ego, your sun, a part of you that wants to embody this energy of this guru, of this wise one. So you might be the type of person that does these things, that studies philosophy and religion, that goes and seeks wise counsel, that travels to expand their knowledge of the world and themselves. That is the guru or teacher or preacher of the friend group. So look and see what you have in your 9th house and how that might apply to your chart and your life. Now the 10th house is the house that is ruled by the 10th sign of Capricorn, and this is the 4th and final angle that is making up of the cardinal cross. Now the 10th house is ruled by the 10th sign of Capricorn, which is the 4th and final angle of that cardinal cross that I've been talking about, which means it's a super important cusp. And if you have any planets that are on the cusp of that house, they're going to be very important planets for you. This is the house of your reputation, your legacy in the world, the mark that you leave, your achievements, your expertise, how you're seen, if you're seen as an authority, responsibility, your life's work. This is an important house. It's a very, very heavy house in that sense of what has your life culminated to? What are you going to be remembered for? This angle is called the midheaven or the MC, and whatever you have going on right next to or conjunct this angle is going to be very important. So for example, if you have, let's say, Venus in your 10th house, you might be the type of person that a lot of people see as very kind and hardworking and smart and beautiful, and people really look up to and like. It could also mean that you're the kind of person that likes to date or marry someone that is of high status and who is affluent, or in general you just like to surround yourself with those types of people. The 11th house is the house of Aquarius, and this house is the house of the mad scientist, the genius. It is the house that represents all things unique. This house talks about groups, your tribe, your larger community, humanitarian efforts, your dreams and aspirations, your networks, and your higher ideals and visions for the world. So if you're someone that has, let's say, your moon in the 11th house, you're going to be someone that values and cherishes their friends very deeply and has an emotional tie to humanitarian causes or to the betterment of the world, and at the very least to the people around you. There are tons of ways that this could play out. That is just one of the many ways. Look and see what you have in the 11th house of your chart. And the 12th and final house is ruled by, of course, the 12th and final sign of Pisces, the grandmother of the zodiac. This is the house that's representative of your hidden side. So it's the house that is least known about because it's the side of you that is connected directly to the divine. So this is the house of dreams, of meditation, of connecting with God, music, faith, intuition, mysticism, psychic ability, unresolved issues in karma, and overall spirituality. So for example, if you have something like Jupiter in this house, you are a person that likely has a lot of dreams, a big imagination. Likely, if there's ever a hidden enemy, because this is also the house of hidden enemies, somebody that doesn't like you or is trying to like sabotage you in some way, you have a guiding angel that is always going to be over your shoulder. So people that have this placement can tend to get into like crazy near-death experiences and be saved in just the nick of time time by some unknown force, that is the luck that Jupiter brings you in this house. Take a look in your chart and see what you have in the 12th house, because that's going to really show you a lot about your inner world. That is an overview of the house system. Now, I do want to say that each of these houses has so much more that it has to deal with, but there's only so much time that I have with you to make a video. I hope that you got a quick overview of the houses and that you understand what they all mean now. So go back to your chart, look and see what you have in each house, apply it to your life. How do these planets affect that area of your life? Each house represents an area of your life, so go ahead and look and see how it affects you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.